I'm Lee Viestfung. I'm presenting with Ashley Miller today on the Affordable Learning Exchange and the work that we're doing in ODEE around affordability and access for students. Ashley? So one of the things that we do in this work is we look at trying to really focus on being responsible with the resources that we ask our students to spend. Can we go ask them to quiet down a little bit? Sure. And we thought we would try to be responsible with your time resources today too, so we're going to try to get you out in under an hour. We're going to focus today on talking about the Affordable Learning Exchange partners, the mission of the work that we do, our strategy, and top 5 updates. So Affordable Learning Exchange is a partnership across ODEE, so a range of partners within our organization, and then a range of core partners across the university, including the undergraduate student government, university libraries, the University Center for the Advancement of Teaching, and the Office of Academic Affairs. And this program is really successful, I think, in large part because of the extensive resources that each of these organizations brings to the table. And I want to talk a little bit more now about why this work is so important. So we know that not only is the cost of higher ed going up, and it has gone up steadily, to the point that it is very difficult for students to afford to be able to come to college. Textbooks have actually gone up at an exponential rate, significantly higher than really almost any other industry in the nation. When we look at the cost of attendance at the university, students are expected to pay tuition and fees, housing and dining, and then their additional expenses and supplies as students at the university. Their financial aid checks are designed to cover their tuition and fees at the university, a portion of their housing and dining. But once we get into all of the additional expenses, supplies, textbooks that students need to be successful in their education, those things are typically not covered. So that becomes a challenge for students who are trying to determine at times whether they're paying for food or paying for a textbook. And what we see there is that some students who aren't buying textbooks, they're maybe waiting to see whether an instructor is actually going to use a textbook significantly enough in a course that it makes sense for them to buy that book, figure out whether they can share with a friend. They end up, even if those students do get a book and they get that book further into the term, they're at a significant disadvantage from students who have access to the course materials from day one of the course. So this is something that we're trying to provide. There are, right now, thank you, hundreds of high-quality, peer-reviewed, and collaboratively authored open textbooks available. So one of the strategies that we've taken is to look at open and free textbooks that have been written by faculty around the country to say that faculty here at Ohio State can adopt those books and really kind of walk away from the higher cost publisher textbooks that they're using and provide students with low and often no cost books that are also incredibly engaging, high quality, peer-reviewed sources. There is at least one free open alternative textbook for 16 of our top 20 courses, and this extends across the university. In a range of disciplines and courses, these open and free textbooks are available. I'm going to talk a little bit about a strategy that we have taken to encourage and support faculty in the adoption, not only of open textbooks, but there are a range of other strategies faculty can use, adopting content that's available through the libraries, sometimes curating other existing articles and other resources they can use in class, or authoring their own content. So we have a fund that comes in through an early affinity partnership with WOW Cable. And that fund allows us to generate a little bit of money from every OSU affiliated person who subscribes to WOW Cable. And that money we turn back around and give out to faculty in the form of grants. We spend about $65,000 a year or less, so in that range for faculty annually, in kind of small to medium-sized grants that allow them to access a couple of things. They have some funding to support the work that they need to do to transform a class to use these low or no cost resources. And they also have access to a range of supports that our department provides to help them understand how to do this work. We are using these $65,000 a year to generate about $1 million of savings for students each year. And over time, what you're seeing in red is the grant investment. So $65K a year. And then the total savings that we expect over 10 years through this avenue is about $10 million. So work we're very excited about, and ties in very closely to President Drake's 2020 vision. He talks about affordable excellence as a fundamental piece of who we are as a land-grant institution. So thinking not just about affordability, but how the incorporation of these more affordable resources can help faculty stop and rethink the way that they're teaching a course, to look at the type of content that they're using, and through that process, really to be able to create courses that are that engage some of the best practices in pedagogy and create more engaging and interactive courses. So this is in part about saving students money, and really also about partnerships with faculty to build engaging and collaborative learning environments. So Ashley is going to talk a little bit more about how we're doing this.
Thank you. So I'm Ashley Miller, Program Manager in OD for the ALX program. So Leave mentioned that this is in line with President Drake's 2020 vision that's around affordability paired with excellence. So it's not enough just to save students money. And the way that we're approaching that is by taking an open first strategy. That's how we like to say it. Open means we're relying primarily on open educational resources. And that means that these are anything from like a full textbook to all the way down to just a small learning object that have been openly licensed. And open licenses are built for sharing, remixing, and building, and making the content better and giving it a place to grow and improve based on sort of the community that edits that document. So when our instructors, what we find is that when they embark upon this process, what happens is course redesign happens, and they start aligning objects that are available to them openly, or that they sometimes create. They start aligning those objects to their course objectives in a slightly different way than maybe what they might when they're adopting a textbook and trying to align their teaching to the way that that textbook organizes ideas and content. So it also creates a lot of collaboration typically between students and instructors, and it really supports this pedagogical innovation that we want to create that brings the work beyond just saving money, because everyone agrees that that's important. What else can we do is kind of the point in that strategy. So those are a few of the reasons we think this work is important, and here are a few faculty members to tell you why they decided to pursue these projects.
The Affordable Learning Exchange is designed really to accomplish two things. And one of those is to support affordability for students. And we know how important that is for students to actually be able to access the texts that they need to learn. And the second is to work with faculty to support them in thinking about really what is the best content that they can teach with in their classes.
We just started our second ALX cohort. So far we've funded 30 projects across diverse departments and colleges across the university. We've already saved $1 million direct savings to students, and our goal is a total of $20 million for ALX by 2020.
So this method of really looking at eliminating our textbook for the diversity courses has shifted our focus in course design by really having us think about what kind of materials will help our students to get to the point where they actually master the learning outcomes.
There's so much happening right now in our world that a textbook can't cover, it can't keep up.
We're really concerned not only with the preservation of information and knowledge, but also the creation and the provision of access. Subject librarians can really work with ALX grant recipients to identify open educational resources that may be available for use in their courses. So it's helping us to not only help learning be more affordable, but also rethinking what excellence in education means.
First, we're actually rewriting a book for the course, and two, we're doing digital slides to help teach the courses. So the course design was actually one of the things that tipped off this conversation about creating this content.
And it's just such an exciting opportunity that we are actually able to create material that are really well aligned with the outcomes.
Once you change something in your course design, because it's all aligned and connected, then other things change. And the thing that I love is that then they have to start tweaking their assignments. And then they have to start thinking about, how do I communicate with my students about open educational resources? It just opens up so many more opportunities for them to think about themselves really as a teacher.
Once a year we put out a call for faculty to apply to participate in the Affordable Learning Exchange. We are looking for people who are interested in learning.
What ends up happening when you use open educational resources is, of course, we're still saving students money, and that is our goal with ALX. But what's happening is bigger than that. We already know that our faculty are great scholars, but what's really exciting for us to see emerge are excellent teaching practices. I'm just going to let you read the clickbait headlines and not perform them. But you will be slayed by what I'm about to say. Little update on what ALX has done to date. We have funded 2 cohorts, that's 30 projects in 17 departments and on 3 of our campuses. Today we've saved, we're actually into our 2nd year of savings, so we're over $1 million right now. In our first cohort we saved $1 million. We've saved about $500,000 additional dollars, or we will, I guess, by the end of spring 18. So that's everybody repeating the savings from cohort 1, and then we've added some savings from cohort 2. We're going to hit about $3 million and about 12,000 students impacted. The initial feedback we've received from everybody, we do provide like a pretty structured project management process for everyone who goes through this, because like I said, it is course redesign, and that takes just a lot of work and a lot of collaboration. So they really appreciate that support. These aren't folks who are really used to project management or being project managed, so it's good to hear that they appreciate that. We've identified some challenges that we need to address. One of those is sustainability. So when you let go of the conventional textbook, you also let go of the conventional revision cycle, and you're now responsible for that. So that process changes. It doesn't completely go away. You have to look at it in a little bit of a different way. So we're going to be addressing that. The other thing that has come out of this is that we give them, they basically start in January and they go into implementation in August. And that sounds like a long time, but it's not at all. And they still succeed, but we hear a little bit of stress from some of our projects about the tight timeline. But that's also why the really close project management is very important in that process. So what do these projects look like? It's not a one-to-one replacement of a conventional textbook with an open textbook. That's how we talk about it often, because that's the most simple way to describe it. But in practice, that never happens. So I have a couple of case studies to give you an example of what this work actually looks like when it hits students. Psych 2367, this is the class in the writing across the curriculum that has a writing component to it. So this is social psychology with a writing component. They went from their conventional textbook to using 100% OER. But they did a lot of remix, and in the open space, remix basically means taking what you want, not taking what you don't want, and putting it together in a new way, making a derivative work. The way that they did that was that they found 2 open textbooks that they really liked. They liked a few chapters from one, a few chapters from another, so it becomes, what am I delivering to students, and how am I getting them this content? So the way that they approached this was they actually just used Carmen, used the built-in functionality in Carmen to create effectively a new table of contents for their new textbook, which is actually links to different textbooks. And both of those textbooks were available digitally on the web and also as e-book files in a couple of different formats. We also helped them talk to students. We gave them some content in a Carmen template actually that helped them communicate to students what their textbook experience will be like now and how they'll use Carmen to access it. And then we also, this course has I think 13 sections. And so we actually did some instructor training as well, because the course coordinator who really worked on this project from a content perspective and a course design perspective wasn't actually delivering the course material in recitations. That was by graduate students and lecturers. So we had to kind of work that into the process to help them understand how to speak to the textbook as well. Second case study I want to point out, and this sort of transitions into our next project that we want to highlight today, which is Econ 2002-01. This is macroeconomics. This is Independence Hall, which holds 750 students. It's full to capacity, both semesters. There's also several online sections. This class is taken by about 1,800 students per year at Ohio State. So huge impact. This textbook that was replaced was $220. The original goal for this, the cohort 1 participant, was to take that down to 0. We learned a great lesson here, which is that in courses like this, which there are at Ohio State, these instructors rely heavily on test banks and other ancillary materials that publishers and other textbook creators make available, and they're valuable materials, but especially to someone who teaches a course that has 700 students. So we weren't able to go to 0. We had to choose a resource that still had a test bank component to support that need that the instructor had. So we did go from 220 in our first round to about 25 per student, which is really great. And it relied mostly on openly licensed materials. But we refunded this instructor actually in our second round because we thought it was important enough to try an experiment to get that number all the way to 0 and try to solve for not just her, but for all of our instructors here and for many beyond Ohio State, the issue of how to compensate for the loss of the ancillary materials. So I'm going to pass it back to Liv while you read this, and we're going to talk about that project.
So I have to say, I think this is the first Lunch and Learn that I saw Mike show up to with a bag of popcorn. I'm thinking that sort of reflects his level of enthusiasm and the entertainment level that he was expecting at this session today. So as Ashley mentioned, if I'm an instructor who's teaching a class that has 700 students in it, and I need to assess them throughout the term on all of the content that they're learning, for me to try to author all of that content, all of those assessment questions that are randomized and changed semester by semester and correctly aligned to the learning outcomes I'm trying to measure, that is a huge endeavor for me. So this is the problem we were facing when we had an instructor who had identified open content but now no longer had the ability to use the test banks that come along with the textbook to assess her students. So we thought, what could we do to try to start to build a set of open resources that address this problem of assessment? So we designed, and I'm going to take a minute, this comes at the end, but I think it's important to do it for a minute now. Alexis and Mike and Marley, could you all stand, please? These are Alexis Duffy, Mike Shiflett, and Marley from the libraries are all folks who work on this project. Thank you, Mike and Alexis and Marley. We came up with a model that said, what if we actually brought together a group of faculty from across institutions and asked if they would be willing to start writing questions to help solve this problem. And through that process, then also review each other's questions so that we had not only kind of questions that were authored, open, and free, but that they were high quality and peer reviewed. So we worked with a partnership with the Big Ten and with the Unison Consortium. and put out a call for faculty to come and do this open authoring project, understanding that these questions would be made available to anyone who wanted to use them to support affordability for students. We were able to pilot in this process. So we did a pilot in June. We piloted both a process and a tool that a faculty member had authored at University of Nebraska to allow for the collaborative authoring and then review of questions. And I will just say that the test banks that are out there are not only expensive, they're actually, what we hear from students and from faculty is they're not consistently high quality. So this is something that we wanted to address. We worked with 3 disciplines: macroeconomics, sociology, and medical biology. Each of these disciplines has 5 faculty who are partnering to author questions to create a total of 1,000 questions per discipline. So a 3,000 question, 3,000 set of question and answers in this assessment bank. And we are currently in the process of wrapping up that authoring and reviewing, getting ready to implement, and are looking to recruit more faculty to author questions across more disciplines going forward. So I want to say this was much of the work that we're doing in the Affordable Learning Exchange is experimental. We're trying things that haven't been done before. We understand that not all of the things we try will work. So we brought those faculty in saying we are asking you to bring your pioneering spirit and understand that we're going to try this and we're going to identify what does and does not work and modify this process going forward. And they were really excited about the opportunity to work with each other across disciplines, across institutions, and to get some instruction in how to write strong assessment questions, because most of the faculty we worked with across 6 institutions did not have any training in the authoring of high quality assessment questions. Let me hand this over to Ashley, who's going to cover a few more things before we wrap up.
Thank you, Leave. I'm shook, personally, by the next thing, so get ready. We just won $1.3 million. In partnership with many other institutions, and this is not about Ohio State. It's about Ohio State, North Central State College, which is the college that's co-located with our Mansfield campus, and Ohio Dominican University. So we have a large public institution, small community college, which is representative, and it will include actually all of the community colleges in Ohio in this project. And we have a small liberal arts private college involved in a project that we're planning right now. We just won the grant and we're about to start doing the work part of the project in the fall. We're collaborating to create and adopt and remix open educational resources in a collaborative way with all of our faculty collaborating to do this. And that's going to happen across the state of Ohio in all of these institutions. We're going to use open textbooks, we're going to use library content, we're going to use all kinds of open content. And we're probably going to create a lot of open content, so that's going to be a cool deliverable. Another thing that's going to happen is that this will include aligning course design and curricula. So that will hopefully help with transfers because everybody's coming from these places to Ohio State. And so we want them using the same books and using the same curriculum. And it's going to have a big statewide impact that I already mentioned. So what are we doing exactly? There's 22 course transformations or course transitions from expensive to not for students. 18 of those projects will include Ohio State. There are a few projects that are kind of one-offs that we won't necessarily be involved in, but the vast majority, there are going to be primarily regional campus faculty are going to be leading these content development teams and curation teams. There's going to be a lot of faculty from Columbus campus doing peer review on all of this work that has been created or curated. And we're going to start the implementation phase next fall. The project's actually starting this fall, but in fall of 18 and fall of 19, we're going to have all of those projects done and adopted. And so what the implementation phase means is that we are going to form these collaborative authoring curation groups by discipline, and we're in the process of identifying those courses now between us. So by course, we're going to have groups that are going to do the work of putting the content together, giving it a stamp of approval. That's going to be hosted actually on the Ohio Link website. They're building, this initiative is going to be called Affordable Learning Ohio, and it's going to be a portal to all of the good work that these faculty have done to put the content together, where everyone in Ohio can go as an instructor and say, what did this group do for my discipline, and where can I go to find content that I know has been vetted by my peers or created by my peers in some cases. These slides follow the Content Camp slides because Content Camp is about assessments, but it's also kind of growing. It's planted the seed for this idea of what is the process that we use to help faculty come together and collaborate. And so it's kind of making its way into this grant award program as well. Okay, and so moving on just a little bit to how we help folks actually come up with a deliverable. We have some tools that we support. Primarily the way that people publish things that they're calling textbooks, right? So like if they develop or curate content, it's under one roof. We're calling it a book, and it's being put on a Pressbooks platform. Pressbooks is a WordPress plugin, so the authoring environment looks very familiar to a lot of people. It looks like you're creating a blog post. There's a word processor, things like that, so it's easy. This is actually managed by Mike Shiflett, so I think he was introduced earlier, and he's the guy to ask if you have questions about specifically how that works. Our current cohort was using Pressbooks a lot, and I expect our next cohort to do that as well. We have over 50, actually we have around 60, is that right? 60 separate instances of sites or books available. Is 90 still right? It's growing really rapidly. We have lots of users, and we have an active user group that's open to everybody. If you want a Pressbooks site, you can have it, and Mike's your guy. But if you want to see just what people have created, you can go to our this URL, go.osu.edu/bookshelf. Also check with Kanye in terms of his thoughts on textbook affordability. But all of these books are available on our affordablelearning.osu.edu website, and you can check them out. They are, for the most part, free and openly licensed, and that means that they affect students here and everywhere. The other thing that we're doing in terms of tools that we're supporting is a tool from Unison. It's called Engage. It isn't a authoring tool, but it's more of a tool that hosts digital book content and presents it and offers some tools for interacting with it. It also brings with it the power of the Unison Consortium, which is in the collective bargaining that it brings, that we can go to publishers and say, we want to pay this much for this book. And they say, okay, cool, yeah, all right. That's because we represent 1 million students in the Unison Consortium, and we have that kind of negotiating power. So the way that it works is that we tell Unison how many classes, how many students in a class want access to the book. They all have it from day one, and they all pay in a different way than they would if they were going and buying the books one-off. So. They have day one access, which has been shown time and time again to be really important to student success. Instructors can opt in. There's nobody's saying that you have to use this tool. And then students can also opt out. So if they want to receive the book in a different way, they can do that. In that catalog, I mentioned the negotiating power that we have. 98% of the books are under $75, but actually 88% are under like 50. So there's a few that go over that, but really the majority of the books are very low cost. We're piloting it this August in 3 classes, 3 sections of 3 classes with 130 students, and their average cost is $28.25 for their books. Leave's gonna come up next and blow your mind and make you question everything.
All right, so we have a request for proposals open right now for this upcoming cohort for the Affordable Learning Exchange. We do this as a phased approach so that faculty who are interested in this idea but maybe don't quite know how to do it can submit some initial ideas, and then we review those, work with them, and invite around to submit a final proposal. So we provide a lot of resources to help people think through how they might do this. The initial phase is open through September 8th. There's been a ton of outreach and PR, and we're seeing a lot of interest come forward now. We will do that initial round of review and feedback and close the second round in mid-October. I think we currently have 15 or more proposals in. For those of you who are connected to faculty and want to point them this way, you can go to go.osu.edu/ALX-grants. The team on the second floor in the back have a bunch of postcards that were mailed out directly to all faculty on Columbus campus. And we're happy to share those with you as well. I want to thank Ashley and the whole team for their amazing work on this. Are there any questions at all about what we have talked about at this point? Yes?
To help me kind of frame this thing, what's the total class count at Ohio State? And you mentioned that you had so many, so is your goal to get to like however many classes we have would all have?
Yeah. So I think, I can speak to this and you can add in, Ashley. We are very interested in being able to reduce cost where that's an option, and also make sure that students have current, relevant, and engaging content in their classes. And so we are working right now with a team of 3 to support as many of those as we can. I think that where we have students all kind of using a similar technology, being able to have the same access to the same kind of tools right away, it's a huge benefit. So, in my experience with this type of work, it's a relatively, I think we're on a pretty quick ramp forwards on it, but I don't know. I think we are trying to allow faculty to make the decisions that they need to make about what's the best content for their students to use, and where they have flexibility in kind of where they identify that content and how much that content costs, we want to support that. But where faculty need to work with existing content, that's something that's absolutely, that needs to be space for that too. Ben and then Lauren.
Yeah, I was just going to say, have you guys seen a lot of involvement from the STEM groups, like engineering and math?
The question was how much we're engaging with STEM fields, and he talked about a $300 book that he had in that area.
Did you say chemistry? That's important. Chemistry book.
There was a great tweet I saw that was a student that had graduated and had a stack of like 5 textbooks with their TV on it and said, "Do you like my new $1,200 TV stand?" That's what we're looking at.
I will say that's why we're trying to crack this nut of the ancillary materials, because that is a barrier with STEM fields, honestly. So we're trying, but we could plug Chimera, yeah. So there's work going on at Ohio State to try to create great adaptive learning systems that could potentially support that kind of need. So calculus is a great example at Ohio State. They're using a tool that was produced by one of the professors there, and they're also ALX grant recipients, and they're transitioning everybody in calculus by 2019 to be using zero cost open materials, which is extremely significant based on the numbers of students that take that course and the cost of those materials. Just alone, in calculus alone, is about $1 million a year savings for our students. So that's huge.
Lauren? So I've seen a marked difference in my graduate coursework over the course of 3 years from textbooks being required to digital content being available either through the Secure Library, the Thompson Library, journal articles, reviews. Are you researching
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. So we only had so much time for case studies, but librarians are the original affordability champions. And libraries, I'm looking at Marley because you just happen to be the library's representative here. They're great partners of ours, especially this year in this recruitment cycle for applicants. We have some librarians that we've leaned on heavily to get like on the ground, like helping people identify places where they can do this work. So the answer is yes, we do that all the time. We ran out of time for case studies, but one example I'll just bring up is that a molecular genetics course replaced their textbook with just journal articles. Also a really good example of the power that this kind of transformation has on the pedagogy, which the course had to be redesigned to support new learning materials. The lectures had to be redesigned to support the different reading level of the learning materials. The engagement between the instructors and the students changed entirely for the better. There was more engagement. Students had to show up to lecture, and there was more conversation back and forth. So it almost, I wouldn't call it like a flipped classroom because that means something a little bit more and it's more formal, right? But it's on this spectrum, right, where the classroom became a different place to do collaborative group work to understand the content because it presented a new challenge to the students. So that goes on all the time, and they're great partners. And I mean, we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on copyrighted, not open content that's made available for free to faculty, staff, and students at Ohio State. So we're trying to lean on that as heavily as possible.
Yeah.
Or can you see any change in the student evaluation of the instruction when you make this transformation within the courses and you want to see the results?
So we're starting to look at working with Shauna Jaggers, who's the Director of Student Success Research, to design some studies to look at the outcomes of student learning using this kind of content. And the early assessments that we did were looking at kind of how students, how they responded to and engaged with the content. I think the learning outcomes are something that we haven't gotten so far into.
We haven't gotten there yet with our study, but we do have a study underway, and we're getting a lot of positive feedback generally about the experience. We haven't directly tied that to outcomes yet, but I will say that there are some studies that have just come out that have been able to do that, which is really significant because in the past, the bar was you're not harming students by moving to this material, and that's what all the studies focused on. It was, okay, outcomes aren't different, we can do this. But now what's starting to come out and just in the past 6 months are really large studies that are showing that drop and withdrawal rates are decreasing, that overall grades are increasing, and the length of time that a student spends in college is decreasing based on these kinds of doing this kind of work and using open materials. So. Yeah.
Has there been any pushback from the textbook publishers on what you're doing?
So with the Engage project that we're doing, the publishers are coming to the table, right? They're coming and saying the model is changing, right? So the idea that you can sell a textbook that costs $300 and that every student is going to buy that, when we live in a world where there are lots of other ways to kind of try to find your way to that content and that students can't afford it, it's not a model that's sustainable. So they're looking, I mean, and as we sit and talk to publishers who want to have these conversations, they're looking at how do they work within this new model, right? So the idea of being able to say, yes, at Pearson, I do hope that we're willing to sell these books and make them available to more students at a lower cost, becomes a model that allows them to not have such a huge price tag because they're having a full reach to all students, right? And that means, as we talked about, the advantage for students is that every single student has the book sitting and waiting in their course in the first day of class or before. So for them to be able to get in and start to make their libraries available, they are really interested in that. I think I guess that.
I would just add to that I'm a little bit of a radical, but they keep me in line. So whatever I say, I have an idealized version of what the world should be. I admit that. But we organizationally are also really excited to work with publishers, and we're also really excited to partner with our bookstores and see what we can all come to the table with to, we want students to have the best experience, and part of that experience is not going into debt to buy their chemistry textbook, or not having to share it with their roommate, or not buying the book at all, which is most often what happens. So I think that there's opportunities to partner on this side of the spectrum, where I'm like, knowledge is free, everybody, let's hold hands. And then this other side of the spectrum, which is, completely conventional model. So there's somewhere in between. We're working to get there, and we want to partner with everyone to do that.
I think part of what's exciting to me too is I said this earlier, but it is really a realm where we don't know exactly what those answers are. And so we sat down with the OSU press and talked about how do they envision going forward, and they're actually looking at putting some of that content into the digital library as well. So I think part of this is really about trying to get everybody to the table to say, what are the things that you as publishers who invest a lot of money and resources into building content, what needs to happen to sustain that model in ways that work, and how can we do that with the best interest of our students in mind? And then it's a lot of trying to kind of figure out options and try them and see what works and correct course as we go. So it's exciting, and I think it does reflect a really big shift in the way we're thinking about educational content and how students learn. So there is a shift towards more collaborative, right? Using the resources that are around us that we all use every day when we work, right? Which are not, how many people are are regularly referring back to college textbooks and working all alone to solve their problems, right? So, well, aside from Ashley. So I think, this is where thinking about how we engage students in the classroom to really practice the kinds of skills and the ways of identifying and vetting and creating information in the ways that they will not only to be successful here at Ohio State, but after they leave Ohio State. Yes?
I was really curious about the question and answer repository that you're building. So I'm assuming that you put some kind of structure together so that it's searchable and that it's categorized with levels of complexity and things like that. Did you involve faculty in the setting of the structure? How did that go?
Yeah, so we're very early in this. This idea, I think, came about maybe sort of late last year, and we were up with a group of faculty starting to author in June. So and that's part of the feedback we got from faculty, was that they were excited that we didn't spend 2 years talking about something, that we just started doing it, right? So we are working actively with the person who created the tool that we've jumped in on, and are working to develop that. There's a lot of development still needed. It's one faculty member whose focus is on psychometrics, and he's trying to think about how does he redirect the tool that he designed for this large-scale kind of crowdsourced model.
Did you ask the faculty to provide you with meta tags as they created the questions?
Yes, so there's a whole process where they're doing that, aligning it to learning outcomes. They're working together as a team to identify shared outcomes across, not just for my course or the way I teach it at Ohio State, but how to put macroeconomics as an intro-level course. Can we agree across institutions on what we think the primary learning outcomes should be for that course? So it's a lot of work, and people were excited to have those conversations.
So I just want to add to that. The tool was not created for the purpose that we're using it for. It was created for use by a professor who coded it in his spare time. It is a assessment authoring web-based system that includes a peer review step. And it includes some guidelines as you're in the process of writing that help you understand assessment design. So the reason it does all that is because that's his field. And so he created it to use in his classes. We are using it at a scale that he didn't imagine. So there are some things about the tool that are missing that we want to, we've received feedback from the faculty that have used it in our pilot specifically about functionality or wants and needs, and we're coming up with a list of requirements. So all of those things aren't there, but we're thinking about them, and I think that that's a process for us that we have some hurdles, frankly, and we're working on them. So.
Sorry, to answer your question, we have faculty involved kind of every step of the way there, and I think part of their project when they were authoring questions was to work in the tool, but to also track. We had a shared document where they were all tracking recommendations, modifications, bugs that they identified in the tool, so that we could be on kind of a constant, an iterative loop of how we direct that tool towards what it needs to be to operate at scale. And it's super exciting. Yes?
On the state level project with the other schools, what platform or tool is being used for that?
There is no one platform or tool, but we at Ohio State are actually managing that process. So we're going to be the ones giving them recommendations. The content is going to be hosted from the OER Commons repository, which is both a repository and a catalog that points to other places. So Ohio Link has like basically a custom site of the OER Commons. So, but that's the engine that's driving it, and so it does have an authoring tool. But we're talking about digital artifacts, so PDFs, web-based books, web pages, just whatever, audio, video. Those are going to be packaged up and presented in one place on that Ohio Link website, but technically will live all over the place. And again, Engage is a tool that can ideally, right now, how it works now and ideally in the future, it's a presentation of content that might exist elsewhere as well. So I'm trying to say that I think the actual artifact doesn't matter. That's what I'm trying to say. It's going to be a lot of different things.
Yeah, I wondered, question banks for the first ancillary material you wanted to take a run at. What other things are we going to need to think about going forward to make an experience similar to what the publishers provide?
So the question, did everybody hear the question? In addition to test banks, what are the other kinds of additional material outside of books or course, kind of written course content that we need to think about producing?
So one of the things that, I can give you a list of deliverables that are potential for that grant group. I think it's a good way to do that. So they're going to be doing things like collaborating to determine shared course objectives. And when I say shared, I mean that with respect to the local community and what they need and how they teach. We're thinking about a core, maybe a 70-30 modular kind of scenario where you can implement standardized content in your own way. So there's course objectives, there's potentially assessment items or entire test banks. There are books, obviously, and then there are other kinds of objects. There are potentially a syllabus, assignments, and I don't want to go into what those might be, but modular chunks of things that you might add to your course that are at that modular, not quite the artifact level, right? There's going to be some guidance that wraps around it, but if that helps you kind of think about that.
We've had some conversations for a little while, and this gets a little bit philosophical, but as more and more content and high quality content is available for any of us to go, there's Khan Academy and edX and Coursera and all kinds of content that's available, then how are we distinguishing what's happening on a university campus that kind of adds the value to our degrees? And so I think it's a really interesting time in terms of thinking about if another campus has a physics professor who's making amazing videos demonstrating the principles of physics, then is there, you know, what does it mean for us to think about whether there are faculty here who want to use that content and then let their kind of teaching and instructional practice wrap around that other content to create a really stellar educational experience for students. And so this is, again, I think, you know, to your question, there are things like, so syllabi, assignments, videos, PowerPoint slides, right? I think, but we're in an interesting crossroads right now that faculty want to own and develop and think about the way that they're designing their own courses, and that's critical. And yet, are there ways that we leverage other great content to help kind of lift up the work that they do or create new opportunities based on other resources that are out there?
And I picked up on the part of your question that I think suggested that what will make this compete with a conventional textbook experience. And so this is going to be the radical answer, because somebody has to give it, which is that the textbook is dead. Long live the textbook. Like, let's kill the textbook. That's actually what I'm talking about. Starting with your course objectives and finding content that you trust, that your peers have vetted and recommended to you, is a great way, right? So it is kind of intimidating to think about, I want to teach them about this macroeconomics principle. Where in the world do I find that content? So textbooks have value. They provide that guidance. So I think that the goal is to move away from the idea that it has to be a textbook, but also acknowledge the really great things the textbook brings, which is the guidance and the packaging of content. So we're making textbooks. They just don't look like, they're not necessarily between two covers.
I think we have time for one more question. Do you have a question, Marcia?
Well, I was interpreting Dave's question a little bit differently, as in content creation. Like, so,
I was thinking modules. I was thinking of things like the publishers right now are offering a set of things that would plug into the LMS schemes.
So technology that might integrate into the LMS.
Yeah, I was thinking more if there's a huge opportunity here and a huge challenge that I hear from faculty doing lab work, you know, remote lab work, and I know that there are pockets of people working on this challenge. But man, I just wonder if this is an opportunity to collect minds to work on, hey, can we create some interactive labs that can be put into, dropped into these.
Yeah, that's a huge, you're right, it's a huge opportunity and challenge. Yeah. Great, well, you know where to find us? Back, left side of the building. If you have questions at any point, please come track us down or head to affordablelearning.osu.edu. And thanks again to the whole Affordable Learning team.